Welcome. In this video, I wanted to drop a couple of tips on how to develop in Unity quicker by automating our class creation and the code we enter into those classes. Okay, so the first tip I wanted to talk about in this video is code templates. And I'm going to give you a beginner, an intermediate, and an advanced tip on how to use code templates to create brand new classes like monobehaviors, etc. Now, as you probably know, if you've been using Unity, to create a new monobehavior, you right-click in your project window, create C# script. And that creates you a new behavior, and you can name it anything you want. In this case, I'm going to name it test1, for instance. Now, if I open that script up, and here it is, you'll see that what it does is it adds in system collection generic, and your start and update method, and sets everything to derive from monobehavior. But a lot of times we won't be using these collections, and also we might want to add in the await statement or put in a copyright notice at the top of our script. And we don't want to have to come in every time we create a monobehavior and do this. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is that actually Unity, when it creates this, it brings it in from a template in your C drive under the installation of your Unity. So if we go to that location, and here's my Explorer window, under program files on your C drive, Unity, Hub, Editor, your version of Unity, Editor, Data Resources, Script Templates, that's a mouthful, but there we go. There's all the templates Unity uses. And if we look at the preview here, we can see that actually this is what we've created here, except test1 basically replaces this hash script hash name. Now, if we open this script up, we'll see it all in here in my text editor. Now, we could actually edit this file. So we can go in there and we can remove those parts. Maybe we want to stick in a copyright notice at the very top. So let's whack in a copyright notice for my company, Warped Imagination. We actually were talking about wanting to put in an await statement. So maybe we come into here and add an await statement with a comment at the top here. And also we can use these special hash descriptions here to put in a summary. So we've got our descriptor in here for our class. Now, if we save this file and we go back into Unity, come back into Unity, there we are. Now, if I create a new C# script, in this case, we'll call it test new, and we double click it to open it. There we go. As you can see, it's not put in the standard libraries. It's just kept us with Unity Engine. It's put in our copyright notice. Test new is in our description because those use the hash inserts. And we have the await statement set up as well. So now, whenever I want to create a new C# script, this comes up and I don't have to type in all those extras. That's just a beginning tip that you can use to get going with these templates. Now, the intermediate version of this code templating is for us to basically create a menu item that will enable us to quickly create objects here and use our own templates that are local to the project itself. So what we'll do is we'll create a menu item, we'll create a template, and we'll have that menu item load that template and swap a few names. Very similar to how Unity does it, but this will enable us to create multiple templates for, say, monobehaviors, editors, all those sort of things. So first off, we'll need to do this in an editor folder, as there's an editor script. So we just create an editor folder in here. We start this up and we'll create a script in here. We'll use Unity's basic one to start off with, and we'll name this create script menu. And you can call it whatever you want. So when we open up this create script menu, well, you can see it's using our Unity template at the moment, but we'll want to change all this. So what we'll do is we'll come in, and we don't want to derive from monobehavior, and we want to have a static class for this one. We'll fill in the description over here. Create script menu helps us create scripts. So we don't need any of this stuff. What we're going to do is we're going to create a menu item, and to do that we use the menu item. Now you'll want to actually bring in the Unity editor library for that, and we want to name our top menu something neat. I usually use my company name for this, but you can call it my menu or whatever. And we're going to just do a monobehavior for the first one. So let's just create monobehavior. Now we want to set up the method, so create monobehavior menu item, and we'll spell that correctly. There we go. And we'll fix the static. There we are. And what we want to do is, the first thing, we'll want to open up a save file panel to basically dictate where we're going to save this file to. And the great thing is Unity actually has a useful window here under Editor Utility. And this under Editor Utility as Save File Panel. And we'll want to put in a title for this. So in this case, create mono behavior, and we won't want to give it a destination to start off with, which is the second one. Let's just fix this. But you could use that section to just create it under like a scripts folder or anything like that if you wanted. And then we'll give it a default name. So in this case, we'll call it new mono behavior, and we'll give it the file extension, and then set the file extension there as well. Okay, that's that part. That will actually open up a save file panel for us. Now we want to make sure that we actually have a save file panel there. Well, not save file panel, sorry. We want to make sure we actually get a path back from that utility. So we'll just check that, you know, we haven't got null on white space in that particular variable. So path to new file name, there we are. Right, now once we've got this path, we want to basically extract the name from it. And we can do that using something called a file info. And this comes from the system.io library in C#. And you'll see very quickly how that works. If I create a new file info and I pass it the path that we just created, and we'll want to grab the name of the script from that. And if we go path, which comes under that, get file name without extension, and then we use our file info dot name. That will do the job for us. So now we've got the name of the script. In this case, it could come from new mono behavior, but whatever you name it in the save file panel. So the next thing we want to do is we actually want to have a template we can call from that will enable us to fill in our own editor classes, mono behavior classes, etc. But in this case, we're going to start with our mono behavior. Now, we want to know where the path is to that, and we'll take the application data path. Now, what this does is this actually gives you the path all the way to your assets folder on your local drive. So it fills in all the details up to your project view. And then from the assets folder, of course, we'll be in the editor folder, and we'll create a template name called mono behavior template.text. There we are. Okay, now we're going to want to read all the text from that particular file. And to do this, we have a thing called file.readAllText, and we can just give it that path to template. There we are. And then once we have that text, we want to do what the Unity system does that we just saw in the previous tip, and we want to replace things like the script name and perhaps maybe the year in our actual thing, because otherwise you'll be going in and changing this every time the year goes up, and a lot of projects go way over time and span the course of years. So let's do text.replace, and we'll use the one that it had, script name, there, and we'll want to replace that with the name of our script. There we are. And also we want to do the year. So text equals text dot replace. Similar format, use a hash, capital letters year, close it off with a hash, and we'll want to replace that with the year. Now, again, there's a real neat sort of functionality under date time, and to get that, you basically bring in the system library, and we'll do now, and we'll do year, and then we'll do toString. So what that will give us is that actually passes us back the year, in this case 2021, in an int, and we can basically pass that with the toString, and that will basically replace any year we put into there. Then once we have all that text and we've done our replacing, we'll want to write that out, of course. So we'll do a file, again, write all text, and we'll have path to new file, and we'll give it the text. So that will write all the text out there. Now, Unity has a little quirk that if you were to do this, you actually wouldn't see it unless the asset view in Unity refreshed. So if you were to not have this next line, you basically wouldn't see anything. You'd wonder where it was gone until you left Unity and came back and suddenly, oh, there it is. But what we can do is we can force that to refresh the asset database. So there we are. That's our script for creating a mono behavior. But what we have to do now is we have to actually create this text file. So if we come back into Unity, now annoyingly, Unity doesn't have a text file creation option, which is super annoying. But what we can do is we can actually just create a mono behavior off to the side, and we can bring that into here. So not a mono behavior, sorry, the template. We can make sure we name that correctly. I believe that got renamed. Oh. So make sure it's named correctly, mono behavior template. And that is the template that's actually going to be brought in by this script. Now what we want to do is we want to set up this template to look correct. And this we can use a lot of the stuff we saw in the previous tip. So we can put in our copyright statement. We can say that we're going to be using the Unity engine. We can give it a script description as before. And you'll notice there's the replacement option there. And then we can give it the entire script. Now, one thing you'll notice is under my copyright, a little bit different from the previous one, I've put in the year there. And again, if we look at this, this is what we're going to change out. And script name is also what we're going to change out here and here. So if we save all that and go back into Unity, now you'll see we actually have my menu up at the top here. Now that comes from the actual script here where we've got my menu. And if we press on my menu, we've got create mono behavior. And this opens up our file, and we're under our assets folder, and we'll change this name to new test. And if we go back into our assets, there we are. It's new test has been created. And if we open this up and reload, there we are. We've actually got the year in there, and we've got new test here and new test here. Okay, so let's now extend that. We want to basically enable ourselves to create editor scripts on the fly as well, because we don't just want to stick to mono behavior. Otherwise, we could have just used the template that we got off Unity in tip 1. So let's jump back into editor and let's go into our create script. And what we're going to do is we're going to create another menu item, and this time we're going to call it, so that's menu item, my menu, because we want it to come under the same menu. And this time we're going to call it editor, because we're going to create an editor. Right, and we want to create that as a static method, editor menu item. Cool, and that gives us our menu item. Now we don't want to copy and paste this because obviously there's some great stuff here. So we'll make a new function that basically takes all this that both of these can share from. So static void make script from template, and this will take in the path to new file that we had, and also we'll want to send it the path to template, which is this one here. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we'll want both of these to use that. So if we pull this out of here and pop that up there, for now we'll rip this out and we'll chuck it down here. And that'll do us. That now we'll take in from here. So make script, and we'll give it the path to new file and the path to template, and we're good to go. Ooh. So that will do the same functionality that we already had. Now what we'll want is to also add an editor template. So we'll want to change the name in our save file panel to create editor. Let's change this to new editor, and we're going to do editor template.txt to bring in there. Okay, so now let's create this editor template.txt. Oh, I need that. There we go. So if we save that and go back into our Unity view and just let everything reload, we'll see we've got the create editor here, but we need to create our template. So let's duplicate that out and we'll rename this. There we go. Editor template. Now if we open this up, we don't want a lot of this in here because it's Gumph and we don't need to have a wake, start and update in our editor. So let's get rid of this. We also won't be deriving from monobehavior. We'll actually be deriving from the editor. And we'll also want to fill in some of the other details. And there is actually a custom editor attribute that we're actually going to want to use. And that takes the type of and a script that we already have. Now we could just use script name here, but when we do the save file panel, this will fill in with editor because we'll be chucking editor on the end of ours. So what we want to do is we'll want to give it a different name. In this case, we could do without editor in here, and we'll create a new replacement in our script. The other thing we want to do is we're going to want to override the inspector GUI because we basically override those on all of our GUIs on the inspector. Well, you can do if you want to. And on here, we're not going to take from the Unity engine alone. We're actually going to take from Unity editor as well. So we'll want to fill this in with Unity editor, and my caps lock was on. So there we go, and spelling. There we are. So, okay, this is done, but we'll want to set up this replacement as well. So we come back into our menu, text equals text, dot replace. We add in our hash, and now we want to take the name of the script, but we don't want to have any instance of editor in it. So we can take editor and we can just replace that with nothing. There we go, nice and simple. And we can close that off. And that will replace that with the editor. So now if we go back into Unity, now if we look, we had new test here. So let's create in our editor, let's come in here, create editor, under editor, and let's call it the new test editor. And if we look at that in Visual Studio, you can see it basically is a custom editor for new test, and it's the new test editor deriving from editor. Now, we won't be able to see anything if we boot up, if we were to create this. So if we created a new object, game object, and just chucked on a new editor onto that game object, here we go. There's nothing in the inspector here because we haven't added anything. So if I just show you how it works, we can come into here. If we were to put in, say, a button, so GUI layout.button, say hello, and we just chucked out a debug. Obviously, you'd do something that's actually useful, but here I'm just showing you how this works. We come back into our Unity editor, and we look at the game object. There we go. We've got a button on there that says say hello. And you could do all sorts of things in there. You could see if the application is playing, and if it is, then you could actually have like overrides on this. Say you had an object that would hide or show. You could have buttons on here that said hide or show, and that would enable you to really quickly be able to iterate and test. But that's an example. But that's the second tip. That's the sort of intermediate level of creating templates. And you can create as many as you want and have all sorts of items that could override, and you could create several types of monobehavior. Say you had a monobehavior that had physics, a monobehavior that didn't, a monobehavior that used triggers. You could actually have all those templates on there and then have options down here to create them. And you could just press that and it would create a template for you. Okay, so let's move on to the advanced. Now we want to really speed up what we just created. And what we're going to do here is we're going to actually enable our menu, which is up here, to be launched from this location. And we're going to know where we are in this location in our file menu under assets to actually create our editor. So that will enable us not have to search through on our save file panel to where we want to put the location, and also not come up to here when we're actually going to be adding items in down here. So what we'll do is we'll edit our script. Now, the first thing we want to do is we want to move our menu into the project view. So when you're in here and you right click, you have this as a menu system, and you can actually create menus under any of these particular windows. Now, if you don't add anything to the front of your pathing in here, then nothing happens. But if you add something like assets to the front, and we'll copy and paste that to the front here as well. Now if we go into our Unity and we let it reload and right click, boom, my menu has now come under this project view. And now what I can do is in here, I can say, right, okay, well that's coming under there, but now I want to get the location that we're currently at in that view. And we'll create a basic function for this, and I'll go through how it works. So get current path, and what we want to do is create a path, and we want to ask the asset database. Now this is the same thing we refresh down here, and what we want to do is we want to get what's the asset path to a location, and we can do this by using GUID to asset path, and then taking the current selection and using the ACID GUIDs of that selection. And we want to take the first selection that's in there. Now, we want to make sure that we've got the folder and not an item, and we can simply kind of hack that by just seeing if it contains a dot, like a file extension, .cs, etc., or is it just a folder? And if it does contain that dot, then we'll basically want to come in and we'll want to get the last index of the dash, so in the file path, and we'll want to substring to that particular location. So substring, starting at 0, ending at the index. And what this does is it basically says, okay, it's a file of type CS or anything like that. Okay, well, I don't want that. I want the folder that that script lives under, or text file, or whatever. And this will basically say, okay, well, give me the last dash, and then give me the path, but a substring of that path from the very beginning to the last index of that thing. And that's all we need. So we can return that path. And now in our save file panels, instead of just having this empty, we can put in get current path, and that will give us our path. So if we save this and we jump back into Unity, now if I was under here and I wanted to create something, I could simply create a mono behavior. And as you can see, it's given us the assets path from the very beginning. And I'll just prove that works. If I come into here and press create mono behavior, I'm under my editor path. So that enables us to really quickly dive in. Okay, so we can now create classes really quickly with our templates. But what about the code that we're going to enter into those classes? Let's jump into Visual Studio. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is that in Visual Studio, there's a great shortcut, and that's Ctrl+Shift+M. And what that does is it brings up this dialog, which has implement Unity messages. And if we look down this, we can see fixed update, late update, all the collision, all the trigger stuff down the bottom here. These are all the functionalities that Unity looks for on our mono behavior. So for instance, if I click on fixed update and I press OK, in comes fixed update. If I was to press Ctrl+Shift+M again, let's say I wanted all the collision. On collision enter, on collision exit, on collision stay. There we go. It enters all those methods in straight away. The other bonus of this is it actually has this generate method comments. So let's say I wanted the triggers. On the enter, the exit, and the stay, but I pressed the generate method commands this time. Press OK. And there we go. We've got the actual method commands coming in with it, which give us a nice indication of what these methods do. Now that's awesome. But what about if we wanted to enter custom code? Well, we can use something in Visual Studio called a code snippet. And this is one of the tools that you can get with Visual Studio. And it uses the IntelliSense system to enable you to enter code really quickly. And why would we use this? Well, on a lot of my mono behaviors, when I start them off, I start entering fields. So serialized field, I always like to give tooltips because I work with designers a lot. So we could do like speed of object and then enter it in. And that's great. But every time I'm typing out serialized field and then I'm finding tooltip and I'm filling this in. Now, it might seem a little bit weird as to why I would actually create this even faster, but there is a way. So what we'll do is we'll create a code snippet to be able to do that. So under our Explorer, we find a folder that we want to use for our code snippets. And in this case, I've used D setup Visual Studio Code Snippets, but you could call it whatever you want. We'll create a text document in here and we'll call it Unity with the extension Snippet. Now, if we go into Visual Studio, we can actually drag this into here and we'll start entering. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste this in so I don't have to basically write it out for you to see. But if I add in the headers and then the end, this is, as you can see, a normal XML format. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste in the whole snippet that I use for the fields. So here it is. And this is the format you should use when you're creating them. So we have a header. It has title and description and shortcut. Now when the IntelliSense comes up, we'll see the title and the description and it will give us more information about what we're adding. And to bring that up, we'll use this particular shortcut. In this case, I've called it field. And the code we're going to add is serialized tooltip, and it's of type C#. So let's save that snippet and go back into our class. So now, under Tools, Code Snippets Manager, press Add, and as you can see here, we have D set up Visual Studio Code Snippets. Now we don't see the file because this actually takes in a folder and pulls in all the code snippets files. We'll press Select Folder, and boom, up in the top here we've got Code Snippets field. Now one thing to make sure of is that you're under the language C# when you do this, because you can actually add code snippets for all the other languages you can actually deal with in Visual Studio. So we have field here and we can see our description and we can see our shortcut. So now if we press OK and we go back into our class, as soon as we start typing field, the IntelliSense comes up. Field enters the code for a component serialized field. Now we tap the tab key twice to enter. And there it is. So I can do it again and again, and you can see how quick it's entering that in. Now we can make even bigger snippets. So if we remove those, and we come down the bottom here, let's remove the code snippets that we have, because you'll basically want to refresh them every time. Well, every time you make a change to the snippets file. If we go back into the snippets file, so in this case, Unity snippet, what we'll do is we'll add in our collision entries really quick. Now you've seen with the Ctrl+Shift+M that we could basically do this by opening that dialog and pressing all the entries and then pressing OK. But here we can have a code snippet with the title collision, with its description, that as we're typing collision, we can double tap the tab key and it will enter this in for us. So let's save that, go back to our file, Code Snippets Manager, and we'll just add that back in again. Let's enter, and it comes, and now we can see collision and field. So if I press OK on that, as I type collision, it comes up, and I can do my double tab, and it enters it. Once more, tab, tab, and we get those all in. So you can see that you could have all your triggers or your collision, you could have regions set up, you could do all sorts of things to enable you to really quickly create entries with code snippets. And that's it. 2 quick tips on how to speed up your code development by using code templates and code entry with code snippets and the Ctrl+Shift+M shortcut. If you like this video, press the like button, and if I get enough of those like buttons, then I'll make more of these videos in the future. And let me know if you have a quick tip in the comments, and then I might expand on that later on. And make sure to subscribe to the channel, it helps me out, and I'll keep adding these videos as I go. And as always, thanks for watching.